Hi guys! Today I bring you this video on how to install the expansion board M.EX for the Roland D-50 synthesizer. This expansion board is 100% original, not copy. Manufactured by the German company Musitronics. This in particular is the D-50 M.EX II version 3.41 plus speed system. This means that additionally, it contains a system that increases the speed by installing other extra elements. Okay. First I will check which is the version of the system that this Roland D-50 has. For this, you first have to turn off the synthesizer. Then, press and hold the 0 button next to the increment button. And at the same time, the synthesizer must be turned on. Until the screen displays the version number for a few seconds. In this case, this D-50 has version 2.21 installed. It could be said that this is the latest official version, although there is an EPROM with the version 2.22. Well, to install this expansion board we will need the following: a Phillips screwdriver, a small flathead screwdriver, a soldering iron, preferably about 30 watts, fine soldering tin, soldering paste or flux, a desoldering pump, and most importantly, the expansion board with all its necessary elements. Here we see the expansion board in detail. In addition to the complementary elements, including the speed system. These come in a small bag, and in this case it is made up of a quartz crystal oscillator and a screw with its plastic base. It should be mentioned that it is advisable to back up the sounds that are stored in the internal memory of the D-50. Although normally these should not be lost in the installation. Okay. First of all, you have to disconnect the power cord and any other connection to the D-50. So, the first thing I'll do is turn the synthesizer down. The D-50 must be held very tightly, because it is heavy and can fall. I will turn it carefully to position it on this soft surface that I already had prepared. This is important to avoid damage to the surface, such as the joystick or pitch bender lever. I will make sure that it is in a firm position. Perfect. Now, we can begin to disarm it. Starting by unscrewing the larger screws arranged in the metal lid. These are 4 by 6 millimeters, and in total there are 15. You have to make sure you keep the screws in a safe place so you don't lose them. Okay. With this ready, we will unscrew the smaller screws located on the backside. These are 3 by 8 millimeters with a total of 5. Excellent. Now we will remove the metal lid, lifting it from below and raising it slowly. Okay. We can now freely access the inside of the D-50 synthesizer. Then, we will focus on the main board that produces the sound. It's this square green, which is indicated here. To work more comfortably, it is better to disconnect it completely. So, for this it is good to lean on a small flathead screwdriver, as well as these shown here. Well, first, I'll disconnect the keyboard connector. This should be done delicately, so as not to damage the connectors or cables. Excellent. Well, we will continue like this with the other connectors until they are completely removed. In total, there are 15 connectors. They are all different, so there's no way to connect them later in the wrong way. It's still a good idea to mark them with numbers, considering they're numbered on the main board. It is also useful to take a photograph in order to remember in detail how they were previously connected. Perfect. Finally, I have been able to disconnect all the connectors in order to remove the main board. With all this ready, I will proceed to unscrew all the screws from the main board. In total, it should be 7 screws. Excellent! We can now work comfortably on the main board. Now it can move freely. It is preferable to leave the protective sheet, so as not to damage the pins below. Well, so, the rest of the synthesizer will no longer be needed for now. So at this point, we will focus on the main board. There are two major types of mainboard or motherboard in the Roland D-50 synthesizer. Here we can see these two types. Most D-50s have the main board on the right. It is characterized by having the chip of the LA synthesis of ceramics. And for this case, the most important thing is that the IC22 chip is mounted on a socket. This chip is responsible for the EPROM, that is, the one that contains the operating system. To install the expansion board, we need to remove this chip and plug the expansion into place. This main board is easier because it is only mounted on the socket, as you can see here. However, on the other main board, this chip is soldered directly, as it looks here. Approximately, only 10% of the D-50 come like this. So it's rare that this is the case. Still, this does not prevent the installation of the expansion board. It's just more complicated. Since the EPROM should be demounted and then soldered a 28-pin socket to finally mount the expansion board. To make this easier, I'll focus on the most common mainboard. So the first thing we need to do is remove this chip. For this, I will use a small paddle screwdriver to support me. Although some special anti-static tool is recommended, then, I will carefully lift it from one end to release it. Meanwhile, I extract it with my hands. It is not advisable to remove it only from one side first, because the other pins can be damaged. That is why it is important to lift it from different places, so as not to bend or break the pins. Well, it didn't come out in the best way, but the chip was finally removed. It may not be so important to keep it in good condition now, but it can help us in case the installation fails, or damage to any component of the expansion in the future. If you have a newer version like 2.11, it may be more useful. However, on the internet we can find chips even with the 2.22 version. Version 2.21 is welded on this other board. However, as we see here, it will be very difficult to change the EPROM on this main board. One of the most practical alternatives is simply to cut the pins on the chip. Then remove the rest of the chip and thus desolder the pins easily. The chip will obviously be destroyed, but this will prevent damage to the main board. Okay. This mainboard is now ready to install the expansion board. We will only have to mount the expansion board on top of the socket, as seen here. Perfect. With this ready, I will focus on welding. Here we see that there is a red coiled wire coming out of the expansion board. This must be welded on one of the pins of a chip on the main board. Normally this should be the only welding needed for this installation. If we have this main board, we will only mount the expansion in the socket with the cable already welded. So I will prepare the expansion board. In the meantime, I'll plug in the soldering iron to keep it warm the moment I need to weld. It is better to solder the red wire first, and then mount the expansion on the socket. Because otherwise, the welding point is covered by the expansion board. The red wire of the expansion must be soldered on the IC24 chip. This chip is the RAM that stores sounds. Just as seen here. The red wire must be soldered specifically to pin 27 of the IC24 chip. We can see that near the chip is marked pin 28 on the main board. That would be the first, from left to right at the top. Then pin 27 is the one that follows to the right. Well, in order not to damage the rest of the components in the installation, I placed a protective plastic under the expansion. This will allow me to accommodate the cable well to solder it, and thus not damage what is below. Since the pins of the EPROM of the expansion are very long. Therefore, they came with a protective plastic that should be removed only when we install the expansion board in the socket. For better welding, I will place solder paste on the tip of the red wire. And with the soldering iron already heated, I will add welding to make it easier to weld it to pin 27. Then first I will apply solder paste to pin 27 of the IC24 chip. I will add some welding to the tip of the soldering iron to make welding easier. Very carefully, I will position the cable until it can be soldered well. It is very important not to heat the pin 27 of the IC24 chip for more than 5 seconds. Since the chip is sensitive to high temperatures, for that reason, I will take the time necessary to look for the most optimal posture and time to weld the cable well. If the welding does not look good at first, it is better to try again. But letting the chip cool down for a moment, I will make several attempts. Excellent! Here we can see a little of how solder should go. Not to make contacts between other pins so as not to cause short circuits or improper connections. Okay. For normal installation, we only have to mount the long pins of the expansion board on the IC22 chip socket. It is very important to connect these pins in the right direction, as this can be permanently damaged. For reference, we can know the correct direction if the round battery is in the same direction as that of the main board. It is also important that the 28 pins are in line with the holes in the socket so that they are well connected. So considering this, I will remove the protective plastic from the long pins. And I will mount the expansion carefully, without crushing other components, each pin being in line with the spaces of the socket. For this it is good to look at it from below, and see if the pins are on line. Since some may be inside the socket, but others outside. Once we make sure of this well, we push firmly down so that it is well connected. For normal installation, the expansion board will be ready to be tested. However, this version of the expansion includes the speed system. For this, we must also desolder the quartz crystal oscillator X1. Which is seen here. It is located above the CPU. This must be replaced by another quartz crystal of greater frequency, which was included in the package. Then, I will proceed to desolder the original quartz crystal. For this case, it would have been ideal to do this first, in order to install the expansion board. Since this can be damaged, in addition to occupying space where the quartz crystal is. However, this installation is complicated and it would be better to test the expansion before this. Well, in this situation, I will use the desoldering pump next to the soldering iron. While I heat the welding of the pins, I will operate the desoldering pump. It should be mentioned that this is quite difficult. Even more so if you do not have the experience or the right tools. It is recommended that this is done by someone indicated and with the necessary tools. This was not the case, so it was done in the best possible way. I only recommend the installation of the speed system for those who really know. Or for those who are willing to damage the main board, or the components of it over the course of many attempts. I can say that I found a technique quite effective. This consists of adding more solder to the pins of the quartz crystal. Since the problem is that it has very little solder, as in the rest of the pins of the main board. So, this does not allow the weld to be in a liquid state and extracted in the right way. Therefore, adding welding allows you to extract more easily what little is already there. This was not carried out in this attempt. However, in the same way, the quartz crystal could be extracted. Because the easiest way to extract an electronic component is to simply destroy it. However, if we are going to replace the component, it loses importance. As if that were not enough, the quartz crystal is also welded by the top of the main board, making it even more difficult to extract. This is why I only recommend this process to those who know about the subject, or to those who have more than one D50 as in this case. After much effort, the quartz crystal still came out, not without being previously damaged. So, I proceeded to weld the quartz crystal that came along with the speed system. This is another important issue to consider. It is also not advisable to do this for those who do not have enough experience in welding quartz crystals. In this case, the new quartz crystal was damaged in the process. Quartz crystal oscillators are very sensitive to many variables, like blows, and even more, very high temperatures. That is why, although it seems that it was well installed, in reality the component was easily damaged. After a long time, as a conclusion I can say that if you do not have the right experience or tools, it is better to weld a socket instead of welding the quartz crystal directly. This allows the quartz crystal to be installed without being damaged by excess temperature, or by cutting the pins. It also allows you to replace the component in case it is damaged, or return to the old system. Taking all this into account, an ideal installation will be assumed. Along with the expansion, inside this small bag also came this screw along with a bracket. The screw goes inside the hole of the bracket, replacing the screw that normally goes in the center of the main board. Just as seen here. The bracket goes between the expansion board and the main board, fastened by the screw. This allows the expansion board to be firm, so it doesn't fall off. Just as seen here. Okay. Having everything installed correctly, I will connect the main board in the rest of the D50. You have to make sure to install underneath the plastic sheet with metal. must be positioned until the holes in the screws are in line. First I will screw the screw of the expansion board that will now go to the center of the main board. This should not be so tight, so that the rest of the expansion board is not lifted. Perfect. Now the other screws will go. It is important not to squeeze them so much at first, since the board desalinates with the holes easily. It is better to place all the screws semi-tight and give them a better tightening at the end. Well, once the main board is firm, it is better to connect the connectors, since this can be easily moved. Then I will connect all the connectors in their respective locations. It is important that they go in their corresponding places and connected very firmly. Perfect. Now we can cover the synthesizer. It is advisable to only screw the main screws, since it may be the case that the installation does not work on the first try. Then I will only screw what is necessary to be able to turn it, and subsequently test it. Okay. Finally it can be tested. I should mention that on this first attempt it didn't work at all. Only the illuminated green screen appears, and the LED of the red upper button. There is no sound or response to any button being pressed. The system cannot be started, and the causes will be explained in more detail. However, this is what should appear on the screen when the expansion board is successfully installed. Thank you for your visit, and I hope you will succeed, if applicable.